you know what? I kind of want Max Verstappen to catch up. Only then will papaya rules be sent to the Shadow Realm. Heck, at this rate, this could end up being 2007 all over again, only with a corporate twist. And slightly less pwah. And yes, that's surprising, since I'm a McLaren fan, but judging from the buzz both here and across F1, fans are very keen to see Max hit the win button again, and it's making me think, can he do it? As I said in yesterday's video, when all the talk was about Max Verstappen getting a second thumping win in a row amidst McLaren's dominance this season, if people were talking about Lando Norris being in the hunt last year when he was around 60-70 points behind Verstappen, then why can't we discuss the same thing when it's Verstappen in the hot seat against Lando and Oscar? It's only fair. And I think what's helping Max right now in particular is his mindset, in that he is only thinking on a race-by-race basis, and if he were to win his 5th world title this year, that would be neat, but as he has said time and time again, every single world title that he's gotten after the first one has been a nice little bonus, whereas with Lando and Oscar, it means the world this first title. Max is keeping his focus on the immediate future, and it's working, and then, as he says, after Abu Dhabi, we will know. And he's not wrong there. We will know. Perhaps this could be the best approach, because Red Bull's mission this year is simple. Not to win the world title, but to give Max a fast car again, and hope the second car can do something with it too. And that second car is critical in of itself. I know it's only one Grand Prix. We might see Yuki Tsunoda fall back on his face again, but in Azerbaijan, Yuki was really solid. Yes, he wasn't able to overcome Liam Lawson, but in his own part, he was able to help Red Bull out in the constructors' fight, and also being a thorn in Lando Norris's side in his fight back against Max Verstappen in trying to capitalise on Oscar Piastri's misfortune and horrible weekend. So I think McLaren should be really worried if Yuki Tsunoda is really starting to gain confidence, and Lando should wind his neck in when it comes to regarding cheap shots about Yuki's performance, because that was uncalled for, Lando. And throughout all of this, I think it's quite obvious that Red Bull has really re-energized itself in just a couple of months. In just a few races, they have now gone on to win 2 dominant victories, as if it was 2023 all over again. You wouldn't have known that they'd had a terrible start to the year, where some pundits, including our Lord and Saviour Bernie Collins, saying that at some points, Red Bull were the worst team. And it just makes me think, if he actually does this and takes the driver's title away from both McLaren drivers, this will then set him on a course in being really compared equally to Michael Schumacher, a driver who would be universally lauded for their skill alone. And even if you don't like the guy, you can still respect the guy. There'd be no animosity, or very little animosity, left. And honestly, this quote from Gary Anderson reads true about how you could sum up McLaren's lot at the moment after what they realised in Baku. So here are Anderson's words for your consideration. McLaren and both of their drivers dropped the ball in Baku. I wonder if they've taken their eye off the ball slightly for this year, given how far ahead they are, or were, in both championships. Most teams are focusing on 2026 now, and although McLaren will still claim the Constructors' title, the Drivers' title is not a foregone conclusion. I sense that both drivers felt that in Baku. Other tracks might not suit the RB21, but they will have learned a lot about a setup that suits his driving style, Max's, and I would not be surprised if he is in contention. Give Max even half a chance and he seems to take it. McLaren simply cannot afford to keep leaking points to him if they want a first driver's title since 2008. And Gary is right, Baku was messy. Piastri's lead's now down to 25 points, and Verstappen's gap toward him is now down to 69. A very nice deficit, I might say. And McLaren missed out a chance to wrap the Constructors' title. These are the hard facts, and it does make me wonder if there are crates of 2025 Constructors' Championship Club are now having to be shipped to Singapore that would have otherwise been opened in Baku. That's all that McLaren cares about, really, the Constructors' Championship. That is the main goal of Zak Brown. The team comes first, but throughout all of this complacency that I'm seeing is that Ferrari and Mercedes still exist, even though Ferrari is in a bit of a downward slump at the moment. Mercedes actually showed a solid hand around Azerbaijan as well as Red Bull. They could, either Ferrari or Mercedes, get back in the mix and start taking away podium places from McLaren or Red Bull, doesn't matter which, or maybe a cheeky win. You might get George Russell in his element when he's actually fighting fit. Charles Leclerc might win one. Lewis might finally get on the podium for the first time before the season is out. One outsider result, as well as a DNF from either Max, Oscar, or Lando, could easily tip the balance in another driver's favour. And I'm not joking, Baku was a real wobble for McLaren. It showed that even though they are dominating the team standings, as two drivers working for the same team, they are still a little bit vulnerable. Red Bull outscored all three of their rivals with a thumpingly big amount of pointage, because I think McLaren's energies right now were basically trying to find the right way in which to celebrate their team title, them getting it back to back for the first time in 35 years. And all it's done is having them end up with egg on their face and a very huge shipping bill. Now, does this maybe hint at a bigger eye off the ball problem? Well, I don't honestly know. Andrea Stella has said that nothing will change in regards to their approach this season, be it the constructors or the drivers one, so far, McLaren are not about to panic, but we have still got 10 overall races to do, that being 7 Grand Prix and 3 sprint races. So in terms of a conscious downshift, I'm not really seeing it right now, but there is still room for that to happen. But despite all of this, though, it's entirely possible to suggest that McLaren were not anticipating Red Bull completely changing their form in just a few short weeks, because not that long ago, we heard Zak Brown time and time again saying that Red Bull sucked and that Christian Horner was terrible. They were needling that team every single waking moment, which I really did not like. This was not the McLaren that I signed up for. This team had just become straight up arrogant, and I really did not like that, and it made me yearn for the days of typical stoicism that we got from Toto Wolff and Mercedes when they were at their peak. But the real question is this. Is Max Verstappen right now capable of pulling off a Raikkonen, as in slipping into the title hunt and then taking it away from McLaren whilst they're dealing with their own stable, and they're completely unaware of what's going on outside of their own wheelhouse? The shape is there, it's just in a more sterile and less antagonistic atmosphere, at least right now, because Oscar and Lando, they're not going at each other's throats in public. The gap shrank again in Baku, and there are many more points still available, with sprints included, and if you think it's impossible, then what was the point of all the publications last year giving Lando Norris the wind in his sails over it? Seriously, Gary Anderson's read on the situation is absolutely correct. If McLaren keeps leaking points in this manner, and maybe other manners, Verstappen will be now in a position to pick up many pieces, and those pieces can easily add up. It's a genuine risk which McLaren really needs to take into account here. They cannot be complacent anymore. And it will actually, in a way, elevate the achievement of either driver, be it Oscar or Lando, that in the midst of Max Verstappen's triumphant and incredible fight back, they can still beat the Dutchman, the 4-time world champion, because let's be real, a lot of people have been complaining about this being really sterile and that neither driver is a worthy world champion. All of this, Verstappen's resurgence, this will add some immediate legitimacy. And it is absolutely necessary, because if they do end up losing the driver's title, it's going to taint the constructor's crown as well, because they'll be thinking, well, McLaren doesn't really care about their drivers, they only care about themselves. And if that did end up happening, Max taking the title, it's going to leave Oscar and Lando at best just scratching their heads thinking what the hell happened, and at worst, it's going to traumatize them. If this were to happen, Max beating both of them, sending Lando Norris back down to third, this being his best ever chance or maybe his last chance of winning a world title, we don't know what's going to happen next year, it wouldn't surprise me if Lando Norris actually announces his retirement from Formula 1. But okay, alright, okay. The foam of doubt does need to come out here, because Max right now still needs a massive haul to try and topple Oscar Piastri. For Lando Norris, toppling him, it's a little bit less, but it's still there. 6 wins plus sprint wins could overturn the gap. It would be razor thin, but possible. And he is no ordinary driver, let's not forget that. And McLaren, they cannot afford another DNF for either driver. Both of them have had at least one already. In the case of Lando, 2. Reliability and grid penalties could decide it as well, and the fastest lap point no longer exists, so that's not a help anymore. Yeah, seriously, McLaren could easily be due an engine penalty, them changing components, and that could easily mean they're starting at the back or at the pit lane. And for Max, it's not all that impossible because of McLaren's team politics. Monza showed us that. Norris versus Piastri is a thing in which Verstappen can capitalize on, because there's the internal rumblings in trying to make sure that everyone remains happy family. If the McLarens keep trading seconds and thirds behind a winning Max in the pursuit of fairness, both drivers lose out to the Dutchman, and one loses out that little bit more. That's not exactly fair in said pursuit of fairness. And now with both McLaren drivers having a completely points-free weekend under their belts, it's thrust Verstappen back into the picture. Not that he personally believes in the prospect of a surprise fifth title or anything, because like I alluded to earlier in the video, Max isn't really thinking about the championship, and that's really helping his mindset. He's thinking as each race is completed, and as far as he's concerned, he's thinking, yeah, this is really good at the moment. The fact that people are starting to make videos like the one I am making right now is showing that McLaren does not have the optics that they would ultimately like. Many people are starting to turn their backs away from McLaren and are now looking to Max Verstappen and going, please, Franz Hermann, please make this championship interesting! Every little move will be watched, and the media storm will only make it worse. Every headline and meme and comparisons to 2007 like I'm making will only feed pressure back into the system. The 2007 echoes are really obvious. Two McLaren drivers are fighting, there are team order debates, pressure rising. Sure, Norris and Piastri are looking far more diplomatic than, say, Senna, Prost, or Hamilton, Alonso of 2007. Everything could easily happen and fractures could easily come that not even papaya rules can try and plaster over. So what McLaren needs to do right now, with Max smelling blood, is just simply get rid of papaya rules. Completely purge them. Just do what Toto Wolff suggested not that long ago, and just have one simple rule. Don't crash into each other. All of this tippy-toeing around, making sure that everything is fair, that's all very well and good, but it's just yet another thing for the drivers to be processing in the back of their minds while they're driving a car around a track at 200 miles an hour nigh on. It's something else they need to process, and that is brain power that they need to be using the steering wheel and not go spinny and then crashy. They need to be thinking, oh, what will the team think? Oh, I've got a long-term contract. Oh, I better not upset people, because McLaren have said time and time again, if you do not follow what the team edicts down to you, you do not have a place for them. They will easily just chuck you out, even if you're one of the best drivers on the grid. And they've got extra leverage, McLaren, because they have the best car at the moment. Only when other teams are able to best them will the drivers actually have some sway back in that process, because McLaren wouldn't have the best car on the grid. And for Piastri, this is absolutely uncharted territory. This is one of the few places where Lando Norris does have an advantage of some description. And in some ways, you could give maybe Oscar a bit of a break, because this is the first time he's been in this situation, and first-timers don't really get everything right on the first bounce. It's been a very long time since we've seen somebody really get off on the right foot from the first go. Lewis Hamilton, Jacques Villeneuve, in recent examples. And yes, of course, Max was really close to both Piastri and Norris at the start of the season, but for Oscar, he wasn't really thinking about that because it's the beginning of the season. Your main goal is to try and make sure you're optimized to the car and you can get the best out of it. You do not think about the championship. But now, though, having led for so long, ever since the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, loss aversion is really starting to play on Oscar's mind. Many critics were actually saying that, hey, Oscar was showing that he was human after all, and Piastri did handle all of those suggestions well in the media pen, but it is a genuine thought that maybe he is actually starting to show a little bit of nervous tension. And that crash at Baku, no, those two crashes around Baku will not help. He will be braking that little bit earlier to make sure that he has the best situation. He will opt for the safer strategy. He's not going to go out on a limb trying to get an advantage which may or may not work. You've then got to cover your teammate, and then now you've got Verstappen in the mix, albeit very far away in your mirrors, but he is there. Him no longer teetering on the abyss of being 100 points behind him. He was 94, but now a nice margin. So yeah, quite frankly, this is when his manager or mentor, Mark Webber, really needs to step up. Oscar needs him now more than ever. And yes, one thing that will ease some of the brutality for the situation from Oscar's shoulders is that this is only his third season of F1 competition. This is all new stuff. And title pressure does tend to amplify little swings in confidence. There are potential instances where he could easily end up starting behind Norris and Max, more often than raw pace suggests. Weather, track conditions, you name it. Oscar himself declared what happened around Baku as a misjudgment. He simply didn't expect the track to be that slippery when he went offline trying to fight back after the anti-stall happened and he was right down near the back. It just goes to show that a young contender can still make all of these errors even though people think he is the second coming or something. And quite a few times Andrea Stella has mentioned that he sees a lot of Michael Schumacher and Fernando Alonso in young Oscar Piastri. But even then, Fernando and Michael made lapses in judgment. But then we've also got to remember we've seen plenty of instances when Oscar judges things to perfection. Note Max Verstappen around Miami at turn 1, that was absolutely sensational. Showed that we're really good sign for things to come in the future, but we got to remember this is his first championship challenge against Max Verstappen and his own teammate who's been through the ringers before. it will be a huge achievement if he's able to beat both of them. And speaking of Norris, the stress for him is really quite different to what Oscar and Max is dealing with right now. Max, no biggie if he loses it. For Oscar, yeah, it'll be a bit of a galling situation, but hey, this was my first go-around. I got really close, but hey, not too bad. Lando Norris was duking it out with Max Verstappen in some way, shape or form last year, but it was in a very different situation. Lando was the hunter, now he is both the hunter and the hunted. He is hunting Oscar Piastri down, and meanwhile, he is being hunted by Max Verstappen, who's now got the wheels on his wagon again. That, surely, for any driver out there, must be absolutely terrifying. No longer does Lando have the confidence that he might have had last year when he was chasing down Max. Yes, I get it, he's trying to just be honest, he wears his heart on his sleeve, he's not sugarcoating things, and I do appreciate that. But more often than not, it has left him quite vulnerable to the media, and yeah, okay, I get it, he's ignoring it, but it still exists. Whereas with Max and Oscar, they just take it on the chin, or they just straight up ignore it. For Max, the team is behind him, and the car is showing some real pace again. He's also not thinking about world titles, where both McLaren drivers are. Like I mentioned earlier, for both McLaren drivers, it's going to be their first title. Max, he's got 4 of them. A 5th one would be neat, but it's not essential. And for those 2 young men, team dynamics will sit atop of this. If McLaren keeps both drivers on equal terms every Sunday, the pit will have to split strategies to defend 2 rival threats from the get-go. One McLaren driver, has to cover his teammate, and they also have to cover Verstappen, whatever he gets up to. And that's not taking into account if Ferrari or Mercedes have a good day in the office, and then they're in contention as well. Like we saw around Monza, even though Leclerc was not close in toppling Piastri, they still boxed him, supposedly, to cover Leclerc. And realistically, even with the basic strategy of Max or your teammate, you can't cover both of them, you have to give way to one of them. And this is where these small operational slip-ups can easily make a big difference. May I remind you of all of the slow pit stops that Lando Norris has been subjected to this year? There have been quite a few instances, not just Monza and Baku, but you can easily count a couple of more instances where Lando has lost a couple of seconds in the pits. Same goes for Max Verstappen. Let's not forget the pit light glitch that lost them a couple of seconds. Red Bull have managed to recover a little bit in terms of their pit stop operations, but earlier in the year, they were slipping up constantly. But yes, for Norris, it will start to crumble if this keeps on happening. If McLaren actually starts to take this seriously and really tighten themselves up again, then Max will fall back into the background yet again, and then both constructors' and drivers' titles will be secure for McLaren. Whoop-de-doo. Fantastic for both. But this really needs to start absolutely right now. And for Norris, this is absolutely pivotal, because if we start to see more and more of these instances where there are mistakes from him, this could easily mean that Max is going to catch up ground on him. He's only 44 points behind the Brit, the Dutchman, and that is a much more realistic goal in which to surpass other than 69. That's only about 10 or so points more where Norris was behind Piastri. Now he's whittled it down in a couple of races to 25. The same could be said for Verstappen. And may I remind you, McLaren cannot have another did not finish for either driver, Lando especially. One race where Max wins the Grand Prix, Lando DNFs, that's going to be a 25-point swing, meaning 19 points, thank you very much. And should it come to that, where Max Verstappen is snapping at Lando's heels and is then coming for Oscar, well, what did they do, McLaren? Surely in that moment when Max Verstappen is looking invincible and McLaren's looking a little bit shaky and precarious, they've got to be backing at least one driver to make sure they escape embarrassment. They have to stop papaya rules, which Lando claims never existed in the first place, but we all know it did, to ensure that they are preserving both championships. Because otherwise, people are going to be saying, oh my god, this is like 2007, and McLaren want people to forget 2007 ever existed. Seriously, all that promise with that car and that driver lineup, and it yielded nothing. In my mind, if Oscar can hold on to the magical win in his pocket barrier of 25, the total he currently has over Norris, that might be enough to force McLaren's hand to back Piastri should Verstappen continue eviscerating their advantage, and if Singapore turns out to be a breakout race for Max. Come Austin, the United States Grand Prix, that's surely the race after they secure the title around Marina Bay. Surely after securing the constructor's crown, the driver's crown should be their priority. And then risk management, the priority after that. But then, as we've seen from Zak Brown, optics could maybe prevent that risk management move, because in the midst of them getting the Constructors' crown, then potentially having a clean sweep of 1-2 in the championship, Zak Brown surely might want to orchestrate a grandstand finish around Abu Dhabi, where it's still both their drivers down to the wire, papaya rules, triumph overall, and that means we get some sort of spectacular finish which has basically been orchestrated. That's exactly what we saw around Monza. Papaya rules became papaya manipulation, artificially changing the results. We have the FIA to dictate what happens in terms of the results classification, not the teams. At least in terms of operational errors. And if Max gets ever closer, then equal treatment for both Lando and Oscar, it'll become a liability. Okay, McLaren, I get it. You made the best car this year. Well done. Well done, you. Well, can you now just secure the driver's crown, be it Piastri or Norris? That means you can maybe focus on next year, so you don't end up embarrassing yourself like Mercedes did in 2022? Yeah, that'd be great, please. As a McLaren fan, I don't want to see that slump before either young driver, because it would absolutely crush their spirit. But look, what I'm trying to say is that Max is back in the game here. He can maybe win his 5th world title, but it's going to be a very tall order. But we have seen Max Verstappen achieve great things. With this latest Grand Slam, he now equals Lewis Hamilton's tally of 6, and he's only 2 behind the legend that is Jim Clark. Quite frankly, that's the record I think Max Verstappen is after, getting 9 Grand Slams in his career. He's only needing 3 more. And what's crucial for him this time is that the entire world wants this to happen. Either to provide some excitement at the back end of the year, which we thought had evaded us, or to punish McLaren for manipulating results and coming up with some really cringeworthy sanitization rule, which should really just been a straight up epic duel. And like I've mentioned a few times before, Singapore is going to be a real acid test for Red Bull. That if they can win that Grand Prix or be in the hunt and split the 2 McLarens with Max Verstappen, and maybe Yuki Tsunoda figures, yeah, they'll be in the hunt for 2nd place in the Constructors. That's a nice little interlude. A nice little rise up from where we thought they were going to be a distant 4th not that long ago. We do have to remind ourselves that in the midst of Lando Norris dominating everyone around that track last year, Max was 2nd. He was right up there in the car that he dubbed the monster, the RB20. And the RB21, as we've seen, has seemingly turned a corner. It's actually giving Max what he wants at the moment. Lauren Mekies has overseen a massive turnaround in such a short space of time. Not that dissimilar to what we saw with McLaren back in 2023. So in the midst of McLaren congratulating themselves for doing something that took them 3.5 decades to try and repeat after the Ayrton Senna days, they surely would want to prevent Max Verstappen from taking all of the glory away from them, cementing his place in history for definite. Even Lewis Hamilton fans will have to admit, yeah, Max is not a bad driver after all, and prevent something that would make 2007 ring and echo in many fans' minds. So McLaren, well done. You've proven yourselves the best team overall. Now finish the job, will you? Because Max could do it for you. And in the midst of all of that, Zach, Christian Horner will be laughing atop his pile of money all the way back in Oxfordshire. And I think you'll be equally entertained with this video here that I've cooked up for you. I'll see you over there. I've just got to go and change my clothes, okay?